Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Welcome to our early echo session. This is the wrong thing, but it is early echo today. We're glad you're here. If you didn't hear, go ahead and just put your name and contact information in the chat. And we are, as you heard, we're recording this session for our YouTube and Canvas site. And if by participating in the session, you are consenting to be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can go ahead and hop off and watch it later. Sorry, I keep pressing off my recording. Okay. So Echo is an interactive community, so we love if you could turn on your cameras and just put comments and questions in the chat, or go ahead and raise your hand and unmute and participate. We want to get to know each other and kind of network and be engaged in that. And with that, we also offer case narratives, and that's the best way if you have a kiddo you're working with and need some extra ideas or help or resources, go ahead and reach out to us, and we'd love to have you share one. And when talking about kids and families we work with, we do want to protect those the privacy of them. So just avoid using real names and not identifying any family members or friends, and just de-identify any of those examples. And so if you have any questions or concerns about that, feel free to reach out to any of our hub members. They have an asterisk by their name, and that's how you'll know who's a hub member. So the key components of an echo session are that it's the community of practice where we share that knowledge, and we talk and like put in comments and questions. And so we have a didactic speaker and a case presentation. So just again, if you have any questions or comments, you can put that in the chat. And please rename your profile with your name and contact information, so we know who's from where and what kind of professions you are. And if you have questions on how to do that, again, reach out to a hub member. And we've been on Zoom for a long time, but if you do have questions about how to raise your hand, here's the instructions. And yeah. And you can pre-register for echo sessions by emailing us. It's actually earlyecho@usu.edu. But you can pre-register for all upcoming sessions. So make sure you do that. That way you don't have to keep registering. And we do offer credits for attendance for professional development. And so to do that, to receive that, you just need to fill out the evaluation, the survey that's going to be sent. And I will also be putting the link in the chat. So do that, because that's a great way to get your certificates. And we use Canvas as our platform for where we put the presentations and recordings. And so if you're not on that, message me, or you can email kurt.phillips@usu.edu, and he can help get you access to Canvas, because that's where we put all the resources and things that are shared during the presentation. And just as always, another plug for those case studies. I already talked about it, but we are always looking for people who are willing to share that case narrative. And it's a great way to get that feedback and different ideas that you might not have thought of yet, or learn about new resources to help your kids. And this is our social media. If you want to follow us, that's where we post announcements and changes to different sessions and things like that, and share resources. So make sure you're following us. And today we're so excited to have Ashley Stuart. She's going to be talking about the ABCs of behavior, and we're so grateful that she's joining us. She is, and I'm going to read her bio, an assistant professor and child and adolescent psychologist in the University Developmental Assessment Clinics. She got her PhD from the University of Utah Educational Psychology Program, and she completed, if I could read, her postdoctoral training at UDAC and an APA accredited internship at the Marcus Autism Center. Yeah, I'll let you, I feel weird just reading it for everyone, so I'll let you go ahead and finish introducing yourself. But we're so grateful for her, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and just turn the time over to you, Ashley. So thanks.
Sure thing. Happy to help. That's just a really lengthy way of telling you all that I spend every day, day in and day out, talking about autism, evaluating individuals for autism. I take referrals from all of your organizations, especially those of you who are across the state of Utah. I probably have seen many children on your caseload and evaluated them. And then in addition to my evaluation and diagnostic work, I also do some therapeutic work on a parent-mediated intervention called the Ruby Parent Training Program. That is a parent training program that's focused on empowering caregivers of young children to manage challenging situations in their home. And that's really the program that brings me here to meet with you all today. That program in particular that I do is rooted really heavily in ABA therapy and in this concept of learned behavior, which is what we're going to discuss today. So I'm going to do the dreaded attempt at sharing the right screen here. Nope, I can see you're seeing the wrong one already. That one's right, right?
Yep, you got it.
Perfect. All right. So in terms of learning, my controls here. Okay, learning objectives for today. We're going to talk a little bit about how behaviors are learned and look at that through the unique lens of the ABC model and discuss the individual components of that particular model in order to really identify why behavior occurs or the function. And then we'll do a little practice in looking at some data and try to see how collecting data through this lens can help us to inform making some decisions about treatment and intervention. So just about anything we do can be described as behavior. Things like brushing our teeth in the morning, getting dressed, hugging a loved one. Each behavior that we engage in throughout our day has been an learned experience through interactions in our environment. And behaviors are also adaptive as well as maladaptive. But regardless of the type of behavior, we know that behaviors are also a form of communication. And they serve a specific function or purpose that helps us to better understand the ultimate question that we all want to know, which is why this behavior is occurring, and then appropriately match those interventions to the function of the behavior. So to take a really classic example of learned behavior, let's take a moment that for all my parents in the audience, we all have experienced several times through our journey of parenting, which is that dreaded candy aisle in the grocery store. Walking through the candy aisle, the child sees the candy in that aisle and asks, "Mom, please, can I have a piece of candy today?" And you know, what does any good mom say when you're in the grocery store? You say, "No, we're not having candy today. We're not going to buy it." So the child decides that this is really upsetting to them and begins to throw a massive temper tantrum in the grocery store, screaming and crying that they want the candy, which mom is, understandably full of embarrassment for this situation, just wants to stop the child from crying. So what does she do? Gives in and buys the candy and gives it to the child. Now, this is an experience we've all had. We've all bought the candy. We've all ended the tantrum that way. But in the concept of learned behavior, what the situation teaches us is that the next time we're in that candy aisle in the grocery store, we're going to see a repeat of history. the child has essentially learned that that temper tantrum was a really powerful way of communicating their wants and needs, and it ultimately got them the thing that they wanted. So the next time they're in the candy store, we're probably going to see the candy aisle, we're probably going to see a quicker jump and a quicker trigger to that temper tantrum in order to try to access the candy. So this is a model that, this is a situation that we'll kind of come back to as we progress and learn a little bit more about the ABCs of behavior. So in addressing particularly more of our maladaptive or challenging behaviors, the ABC model that you see in front of you right now really helps us identify the triggers for behaviors, as well as the actions on the behavior that maintain it long-term, which are essentially the consequences. And what we know is that consequences can be both positive and negative. When something good happens, like you cook a delicious meal and your family gives you lots of praise for it, you're more likely to cook that meal again in the future. Whereas when something undesirable happens, such as losing screen time as a result of hitting a sibling, you tend to learn from those experiences and engage in that behavior a little less frequently. So having some idea of what the trigger or the antecedent is, as well as what the consequence that follows the behavior is, better informs this ultimate question that we're asking ourselves, which is, why is this behavior happening? They're not the end-all be-all when it comes to behavior, though. There are other things that we have to consider as we're looking at behavior and trying to figure out the why. And some of those other considerations that we might make is, who was there? Who was involved in the situation? Was it mom? Was it sister? Was it dad? What time of day did this behavior happen? Are challenging moments happening more as we're getting closer to bedtime and that so-called witching hour of the day? Or are they more likely to happen in mid-afternoon when the child maybe hasn't had a snack for a while or eaten anything? And then where is the behavior occurring? Are behaviors different when a child is in school or at daycare or even in the home? And then more than that, are more behaviors happening when the child's playing outside versus when they're inside? So really the specific location of the behavior can help us as well in informing that question of why. So let's take a look at each component of the ABC model in more detail, and we're going to start with antecedents. So antecedents are essentially a situation or event that comes prior to a behavior. It's the before of a behavior. We commonly refer to antecedents as triggers for behaviors. So if the trigger doesn't happen, the behavior is not going to occur. And antecedents can be lots of different things. They can range from an event, such as the phone ringing or driving a different way to school. They can also be objects, like a plate of cookies, that's my cue to eat those cookies on the counter, or a stop sign to slow down my car. Or they can be people. So mom, but not dad, or grandma, but not dad. Essentially, antecedents are cueing you to do something. They cue you to act in some sort of way. And for example, if we take a child getting ready for school, maybe the antecedent to them getting up for school is mom coming into the room and waking them up. For another child, it might be the alarm clock going off. When we're driving our cars, like I mentioned before, the antecedent to stopping is seeing a stop sign. But the antecedent to throwing a temper tantrum might be mom giving a demand to a child, clean up your toys. So essentially, antecedents are really important and play a very important role, in fact, in determining whether or not behavior is going to occur. So let's do a little practice here. Now, I know there's lots of you on the call, So it might be best if we utilize the chat function. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a couple situations and you're going to attempt to identify what the trigger or the antecedent is in these particular situations. So in our first example, Susan hits Fred after he takes the book that she's looking at. What's the trigger in that situation? What's the antecedent? Go ahead and jot it in the chat. You guys are pros. Everybody's very quickly identifying taking the book, and specifically Fred taking the book as the antecedent. Great. Okay, let's try the next one. Mary starts to interrupt her mother by screaming when she's talking on the telephone. What do y'all think of that one? Which one's the antecedent there? You've got it. I have a feeling a lot of you have experienced this phenomenon, which is that when your attention is diverted elsewhere, like on the phone or a Zoom call, all of a sudden the children become really, really needy, right? So yes, mom talking on the telephone is the trigger for that, interrupting and screaming. Okay, next one. Randy throws his vegetables after his mother puts them on the plate. What's the trigger there? Here they come. Yep. Just those darn vegetables being on the plate, right? Perfect. You guys are antecedent pros. And last one, Noah screams when he sees the playground on the way to the doctor's office. What's our trigger there? Yep, seeing lots of playgrounds coming through. Perfect. Yes. Seeing that playground. If mom had driven a different route to school that day, or a different route to the doctor's office that hadn't gone by the playground, we likely wouldn't have had this screaming behavior. Good. Okay. Well, we've got antecedent identifying pros in the audience today. The next part of our model is behavior. So, using really specific behavioral terms can be really helpful when we are communicating with caregivers, as well as when we're communicating with other providers or therapists or even doctors. It also allows us to pinpoint really important decisions to help change behavior. So when we talk about behavior in the ABC model, we're really specific about how we define behavior. And behavior, in fact, is thought of as any action that you can observe, you can count, or you can time. So really, it needs to be something that you can see and you can measure in some sort of way. The other important piece of behaviors is that behaviors are both adaptive and maladaptive. So earlier I mentioned that behaviors could be positive things like hugging your child, but they can also be more challenging situations like hitting, pushing, biting, and pinching. Really, the idea is that when we are describing behavior, we want to give really detailed illustrative descriptions so that we know that everybody is on the same page when we're talking about a particular behavior. You all work with families on a day-to-day basis, and so I'm sure you've experienced conversations where a parent says to you something like, "Oh, Tim was really bad at soccer practice." And asks, like, did he have a bad time during your therapy session as well? That term bad might mean something very different to me. It might mean something very different to mom. It might mean something extremely different to dad. So we don't all really know that we're talking about the same thing when we use vague terms like bad. But if I instead heard from a parent something like, Tim pushed a teammate when he was at soccer practice. He also appeared a lot more irritable when he got to practice. He was clenching his fists and he was whiny and really withdrawn from the interaction altogether. How was his day at home? Is he pushing anybody at home or whining at home? Now we all can picture what it looked like when Tim was at soccer practice. We have an idea of what the caregiver is trying to find out from you. And we know a lot more about what's happening because these behavioral terms are being used. So they really are allowing us to picture the behavior. So one thing that I really press families on as I'm working with them, especially in my therapeutic sessions, is to use these really descriptive and illustrated descriptions of behavior whenever we talk about anything that their child is engaging in. So let's do a little practice, because even terms like aggressive aren't really specific enough. So how could we be more specific with the term aggressive? Someone wants to be brave and unmute themselves. I'd love to hear. You can also put ideas in the chat if that's easier.
I'll unmute. Because I would say don't describe aggressive, describe the specific behavior. What does aggressive mean? To some people, it means using an angry tone. To some people, it means hitting. So I would state this just specific, like, oh, you know, Tommy went and hit the other kid on the playground, or Tommy screamed at his sister, or whatever the specific behavior is. Aggressive is kind of a judgment and kind of a label where everyone interprets that differently. And I've noticed that a lot in early intervention when families will say they're so aggressive, and I'm like, what does that mean to you?
Exactly. Because you described several different types of aggression, even in just going through some more descriptive and detailed versions of aggressive. There's verbal aggression, where it's maybe more of like the screaming, the name calling, the using unkind words. But then there's also physically aggressive acts like hitting, biting, pinching. I see grabbing, kicking. We can also be even more detailed when we talk about things like hitting. Well, do they hit with an open hand, or they hit with a closed fist? Like, what does it really look like? Good idea. This is a favorite one for me. I hear this term a lot from families, and it definitely means a lot to of different things to different people. So what do you take on disruptive? How can we be more specific with the term disruptive? What would that look like?
I'll unmute again.
Love it.
One way my daughter is disruptive. So disruptive is, it can be, when people say disruptive, they're like getting up in the classroom and running around, or it could be they're like jumping off furniture or breaking things. For me, the way my daughter is disruptive is when I'm trying to have a conversation with someone, she will come stand right in between myself and the person I'm having the conversation with and try to talk to me directly. And that's very disruptive. She's not being aggressive, but it is very disruptive because she just comes right in the middle of that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All disruptive behaviors that you described that give more of a picture of what we're attempting to communicate to the other person than just using this broad term of disruptive. So yes, things like interrupting, speaking out of turn, running around the classroom. We can even have disruptive behaviors like ripping up pieces of paper and throwing them in the air, right? It really is, I think I saw in the chat, Brenna said an interruption of what expected behavior would be, which I like that description as well. Hey, good job. Well, let's move on to the last part of the ABC model, which is consequences. Now, while antecedents really describe what trigger behavior, consequences describe what happens immediately after and in response to a behavior. And consequences can be natural. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to burn your hand. That's a natural consequence to engaging in that behavior. If you put money in a vending machine and push the Coke button, you're going to get a Coke. Again, another natural consequence. It's that consequence that really determines whether or not we're going to see that behavior again in the future. So it maintains the behavior or makes it more likely that it's going to continue over time. So consequences can be positive things, which oftentimes goes against our just fixed definition of consequence. We tend to equate the word consequence with punishment. And in the ABC model, that's not how it's used. It's again, just used more broadly to describe anything that happens after a behavior. So it can be a positive thing, like getting that Coke. But it also can be a negative thing, like losing time on the computer after you've hit your brother. Okay, so when consequences are positive, so when your peers laugh at you after you use a swear word, you're more likely to use that swear word in the future. Whereas if you're sent to the principal's office when you use a swear word, you're less likely to engage in that behavior. So they can be both positive and negative. And taking this information together from the ABC model allows us to determine that ultimate question that we began with, which is the why is behavior happening? And it's often difficult to determine why behavior occurs. So taking this more systematic approach of looking at where the behavior is occurring, who's involved, what time of day, along with the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences themselves, allow us to make a more educated guess as to what the function or purpose of the behavior is. And then that can help us decide the best strategies for changing them. So by keeping this information around the specific antecedents and consequences surrounding a behavior, we can better understand why children continue to engage in problem behavior. And once we really carefully analyze and observe the antecedents and consequences, we can determine this purpose of a behavior. And essentially, this whole process that we're talking about is what's often referred to as a functional behavior assessment. And this helps us to make informed decisions about how to change the behavior. And many parents will tell you things like, I have no idea why my child engaged in this problematic behavior. Or they'll describe behavior as happening for no reason. It just came out of nowhere and it happens for no reason. We also know that many children, especially children in the early intervention program, have difficulty with communication. So they may actually have a hard time communicating to their caregivers or to their therapists what's bothering them. Or they also just may not have a way of asking or requesting something that they want. And even children who have good verbal skills and are typically quite verbal can still have difficulty using their words when they're frustrated or angry. So really understanding that behavior is very communicative helps us to understand a little bit more about the purpose and why of behavior. Because these behaviors are serving as a form of communication. And in fact, many children will learn that their behavior communicates their wishes really effectively. So when a child is engaging in problem behavior, it's really important to ask yourself, what is this child trying to communicate through this behavior? Tantrums could be trying to communicate things like, this is too hard. Or screaming could mean something like, leave me alone. I need some time to myself. Hitting could be communicating something as simple as, that's mine. Give it back to me, right? So when we are looking at the function of behavior, especially when we're talking mostly about maladaptive behaviors, the purpose or the why or the function of behavior is typically broken down into 4 different categories. So the first category is escape motivated behavior. Escape motivated behavior is behavior that is communicating, I want to get out of doing something. I don't want to do the thing you're asking. So throwing a tantrum when mom asks you to clean up your room is a really good example of an escape motivated behavior. A second reason children engage in problematic behavior is to get access to something, which is what we call tangible function. They're trying to access something. So if we go back to the kid in the grocery store who throws that temper tantrum in the candy aisle, the purpose of that temper tantrum was to communicate that they wanted access to the candy. Okay. A third function is getting attention from another person. So Erica illustrated a really perfect example of this when she described her child as getting in between herself and the person that she's talking with in order to gain her attention. So that disruptive behavior of being really intrusive with her body space and talking to her mom is an example of an attention-seeking behavior. And then finally, we know that sometimes maladaptive behaviors are more sensory motivated, or what we term automatically rewarding behaviors. So some children, especially children who have significant developmental delays, including autism, will engage in repetitive motor mannerisms like flapping their hands or rocking their body. Those behaviors seem to serve some sort of sensory release for the children as much as we understand them. I also really equate these to the automatically rewarding behaviors that just about everybody does on a daily basis. When I'm really focusing, sometimes I'll twirl my hair or I'll shake my leg. There's no real communicative purpose behind those behaviors. We just do them because they simply feel good or are pleasing. Okay. It's also important to note that while behaviors seem to fit into, most maladaptive behaviors seem to fit into one of these four functions, there can be multiple functions to a behavior, and that's often important to understand when you're driving it and determining what intervention is going to be best for a particular behavior. So to better kind of illustrate why functional analyses and looking at behavior through this ABC lens can better inform treatment, let's take this particular example. Here, what you're seeing are two different students. Both students are engaging in the same disruptive behaviors. They're making spitballs out of their homework assignments. They're talking excessively in the classroom, climbing on desks and wandering around. Both students are also given the same consequence in response to this broadly disruptive behavior. They're both sent to the principal by their teacher as a consequence. Now, the problem is that for student one, we learn that the reason that she engages in these behaviors we learn that she engages in these behaviors anytime a math worksheet is placed in front of her. Whereas for student two, she seems to engage in these behaviors when her peers are otherwise engaged in work. So for student one, the behaviors serve as a function of escape, that she's trying to get out of doing that math assignment. So the intervention of being sent to the principal's office is actually going to increase the behavior in the future because it's desirable for her. If she gets sent to the principal's office, she doesn't have to do that math assignment. So it essentially is increasing the likelihood of us seeing this disruptive behavior in the first place. Whereas for student two, the intervention is successful because what student two is really seeking out is the attention of her peers. And so being sent to the principal's office takes away that attention, the thing that's continuing the behavior and making it more likely to occur in the future. So it successfully reduces the more difficult behavior because it's appropriately targeted to the function. This this is an example that I would encourage you to use as you talk to caregivers about behavior, because it's a really good illustrative description of why it's so important to understand that function before we can decide how to intervene on a particular behavior, if we want it to be successful. What you're seeing on your screen now is a homework data sheet that I actually utilize in my parent training program. The parent training program that I do is really data driven. So I teach parents to use this ABC model to identify the function of their child's behavior and then bring that data back to me so that as we continue through our time together, we can make sure that we're appropriately targeting interventions based on that particular child's behavior. Oftentimes, parents report to me just by doing a simple exercise like this, that they seem to just understand a little bit more about, one, how they may be contributing to triggering certain problem behaviors in their child, and two, how they may be inappropriately utilizing consequences and increasing the behavior in the future. So it's a nice little simple exercise that you could even do during an early intervention session with a family to help them better understand some of the more challenging behaviors that their child is engaging in. Now, I give families this data sheet, but I also tell them that utilizing a specific data sheet or following a particular form is not as important to me as practicing the skills that we're looking at on these forms. So practicing identifying and picking out the triggers, and practice and identifying the consequences, and then taking all of that together to determine the function. This sheet just also has room for that additional information that I mentioned at the beginning might be very helpful, which is knowing like the time of day, the setting, the activity, and who was there to help better inform. So now I'm going to show you a little video example, and we're going to practice identifying the ABCs, so the antecedent, behavior, and consequences, and then take a best guess as to what the function of this particular behavior is. So I'm going to switch share screens here. I always think I'm going to be faster at this than I am. Okay.
Can I have a brownie?
Oh, not right now, honey. All right, it's lunchtime.
But why?
Because it's lunchtime. It's not time for brownies.
Open it.
I said it's not time for brownies.
Open it.
Don't.
Open it.
All right, you can have one brownie. That's it now.
Okay, so let's start by identifying the problem behavior in that situation. My hot tip for y'all is that when you're doing a functional analysis, it's always easier if you start where the behavior is. Then you can kind of backtrack and figure out what the trigger was and what the consequence was. So shout out to me what the problematic behavior was and kind of give good behavioral descriptions of what you saw.
Mom not making a move toward making lunch when the kid is hungry.
Okay, so the child was hungry, but specifically, what behavior did the child engage in?
Well, for one, I think that child just trained the parent instead of the parent training the child. So the child wanted the brownie, the mom said no, and then he continued pestering, and then when he escalated, she gave in. So it trained her that to keep him quiet, I'm gonna give in. And he was like, oh, if I just start to throw a fit, I'm gonna get what I want.
Yeah, you're already, Erica, identifying like what that child learned in that particular situation for sure.
Well, the other thing is it was a tangible thing because she didn't put the brownies away either. So she put them right back in front of him. So she didn't remove the
Yeah, Mary's giving you a preview into our session together next month, which is preventing these problematic situations. If the brownies weren't out and available, if mom had controlled the environment a little bit better, we likely wouldn't have had this interaction. I see in the chat, Laurel, you described the behavior as the child demanding verbally the brownie. You even hear his voice get louder. He also did push the brownie box into his mom. So for the B in our model, we're really going to focus on those particular behaviors, the stomping the feet that he did as well. Those are the maladaptive behaviors. So I think this has kind of been hinted at in our discussions already, but let's back up now. And what was the trigger? What happened right before he started demanding the brownie and pushed it and stomped his feet?
mom went right back to what she was doing. She wasn't paying attention to him.
So
She went
mom
right back to reading.
withdrew her attention. What did she say right before that though?
She said, it's time
Lunch.
for lunch.
She said, it's almost time for lunch. She said a particular word that can be quite triggering.
No.
She said no.
No, yes. Mom said no. So that antecedent for this disruptive behavior, that stomping, the pushing the brownie, was mom telling the child, no, you can't have the brownie. It's almost lunchtime. But it's likely that it was that little word of no that really triggered this. Now, what happened after the temper tantrum? What maintained that behavior?
The fact that he was hungry.
Well, what did mom do? He threw
Oh,
that
she still
temper
ignored
tantrum, and she did what?
Continued to say
She-
no and ignored.
She gave in.
She gave in. She gave him the brownie. Erica, what you're describing, if mom had stuck to that, ignoring that she initially tried to do and going back to her work, we might not have this behavior again in the future. But what mom actually did was open the box of the brownies and gave it to him. So
yes.
yes. So what is the purpose of that behavior? So what was that temper tantrum trying to communicate to mom? Was he trying to get out of doing something, escape something? Was he trying to get access to something or a tangible? I'm seeing some tangibles in the comments. Attention, or was it an automatically rewarding? We've got overwhelming tangible responses in the comment, which is correct. The purpose of that behavior was to communicate his desire for access to that brownie. Good job. Was that kind of a helpful activity in looking at this ABCs of behavior? All right, let me go back to hopefully sharing the correct screen. Okay. So this exercise is not necessarily just to teach you all about the ABCs and how to do a functional analysis of behavior. But really, the idea is for you all as early intervention providers to take this information to the caregivers on your caseload and teach them and empower them to look at behavior through this different lens. Because when it comes down to it, they're the experts on their child's behavior. And so when you have an expert in developmental interventions, coming together with the parent, the expert on the child, we have this perfect melting pot that's going to increase the likelihood of us being successful in disrupting these more challenging moments. We also really want to empower caregivers with this information because we know that challenging moments in the home, we all know this from personal experience, they're stressful. And when you have a child who engages in really high rates of challenging behaviors in the home, we see increased parental stress in the home. So by including them in these functional analyses and teaching these strategies to parents in particular, we can really not only have an impact on the child's behavior, but have an impact on the whole family dynamic and decrease the stress in the home as a whole. This is just that Ruby parent training program that I mentioned that I do as part of some of my clinical work at the University Developmental Assessment Clinic. You will have my contact information, and if you're interested in learning more about it, I currently have a grant from the Autism Council of Utah to train more providers who have experience in behavioral interventions on this particular intervention so that it can reach more families across the state of Utah. I'm one person and I see 5 families a week, and there's more than 5 families a week that could utilize this program. So don't hesitate to reach out if you want to learn a little bit more about it. And then, as I alluded to, next month, we're going to continue the topic of behavior, but we're really going to focus on, for me, what I think is one of the most powerful things for families to learn, which is how to avoid triggering problem behavior in the first place. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and I'm here for questions as you all have them.
Did you say, you shared slides with the ABC so that, or is there a handout we can give to parents to kind of help explain that?
I did share my slides with Janelle, so they should be available for you all, I think, on your Canvas.
Yeah, it will. Yep, the slides will be available on Canvas. So like I said, if you don't have access to them, message me and we'll, during this session, and we'll get you access to that.
Yeah. And I'll put my email here in the chat. And if you want any more information about Ruby, Brenna, I do recall you were in my training group from last year. So Brenna can talk to you directly about the experience and training on Ruby, but I'd also be happy to talk to you about future opportunities.
And then do you see the 2 questions in the chat, Ashley?
Yes, you may use the form that I provided for sure. And you can kind of take that format too and manipulate it to be whatever is going to be the most helpful for you. Ooh, and then let's see, sure I'm not missing. Oh, Shelby's question. I love this one. How do you explain maladaptive to parents so that they understand maladaptive versus manipulative? So my way of approaching the manipulative question is that children are not unlike any person. People are going to work in ways that work for them, right? So whether or not that is a manipulative behavior is kind of a nuanced term, I guess. It's almost like splitting hairs when it comes to language. But really what I think is most empowering to know is that, like, when a child engages in a behavior, understanding a little bit more about why they do that behavior can help you as a parent avoid that behavior happening in the future. So a behavior having a malicious intent or a manipulative intent doesn't change the function of the behavior. It still comes down to them trying to get out of doing something, trying to get access to something, or trying to gain attention of something. And I think, framing it in the way that we know that everybody does things that work well for them can often just be a little bit more disarming. Great question. The forms are available in Spanish. I actually have 2 Spanish-speaking families doing the therapy with me as well. So the therapy can be delivered in Spanish. We also have videos now that unfortunately are not ready to fully disseminate, but there have been videos created, just like the one I showed you, in Spanish. So the whole therapy can be done in Spanish.
Does anyone else have any questions? Oh,
And yes, doing the training would get you access to all of the materials. And another question I commonly get about the training is who's kind of qualified to do the program and implement the therapy. And the authors don't make any requirements like being a licensed psychologist like myself. It's more that they encourage the therapist to have pretty extensive knowledge in behavioral interventions. Someone who has some experience, not necessarily directly in ABA, but just in implementing behavioral interventions. And that's because, like any therapy, there is a nuance to it. So while there's a manualized program for you, you're still going to have to tailor and individualize the program for the particular family you're working with. Sounds like there's an interest in early intervention there to learn this. So. Yeah. Any other questions?
I will point out, Brenna just put in the chat that the program for parents is a commitment. I think it
is.
was once a week for an hour for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's 10 to 12, actually, 10 to 12 weeks.
Oh.
So it's double. Yes, it is a commitment. And that's because behavior change takes time, right? And there's a lot that a family needs to know in order to have the optimal outcomes that we want. And really, the biggest goal of this therapy is for the family to feel confident in implementing strategies that I would implement as a clinician when working with their child. So, it took me 7+ years of schooling to get to where I'm at now. And I'm taking that and condensing it into 12 weeks of therapy. So there is like a matter of finding a good fit in the family for this type of a particular intervention. But I do think that with that, there are isolated lessons like the one that I just did today that you could do as part of an early intervention session that could be really beneficial for a family. And the therapy, if you're asking particularly about the patients that see me, I am doing it virtually, and that's in an effort to expand offerings outside of the Salt Lake area. So I have families right now in Vernal and other places. So I do it all over Zoom, but I trained on it in person, so it can be both.
Does anyone else have any questions? I don't want to cut anyone off, but if not, we'll go ahead and
You'll get another sneak preview next month because prevention is also part of this program. So
yes, and I was just about to say that is make sure you register for next month. It's May or June. I can't believe I'm already saying June, but June, the first Wednesday of June, whatever that day is. June 7th, sorry, and it's about preventing challenging behavior, right? And it will be Ashley again. So if you liked this session, come back on in June. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much, Ashley, for coming and joining. And again, feel free to stay or hop off if you have to. We know you're busy. And everyone's saying thank you in the chat, just in case you don't see it.
Well, thank you all for having me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next month. I do have to hop off, but thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, just the slides and everything will be on Canvas. So if you don't have access to your Canvas page or have any questions, please email us. We want to make sure you can get that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our case presentation, which we're going to have it from Erica Peterson and Michael. I don't want to say your last name wrong, but I think it's Garhart. If I'm wrong, I apologize. And then I think Crystal, I don't know if you're also, I don't know who's doing what, but we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you. And I do have your document. I'll go ahead and share whenever you're ready. So just let me know.
Yeah, if you just want to put that on. So
Okay.
I'm Erica. I'm a developmental specialist at Root for Kids in St. George. And we're going to let Michael, who is the parent or the father of this child, actually present and discuss what's going on. Just a brief start is the child is a 30-month-old male, cute as heck. He recently had a diagnosis or received a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. He has an older brother with autism as well. They're being raised by Michael as a single father, and he's an amazing dad. The child has a very, very strong attachment to his father, so that is a definite bonus. And we've been working with him since he was about 16 months old. So I'm gonna let Dad take over here.
All right, hello. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, because I'm not used to having this hit a button to speak thing. Adam is different with the odds. I mean, like all autistic kids, they're different. His brother and him are like opposites in the way that they are autistic. It's unbelievable the difference in the two of them. But with Adam, some of the biggest problems is verbal. Probably in the last 6 to 12 months, his vocabulary has only expanded from about 2 words to 6 words. And again, he's not too far off. He'll be 3 in October. So, I mean, definitely way behind there.
And he has been receiving speech therapy services. So with our SLP, occupational therapy services and special instruction. So those are the services on his IFSP.
Yeah, and we've tried multiple ways to get him to communicate, like with sign. He wants nothing to do with sign language. We've tried like using picture choice, or just, even pictures in general to try and like point out things he would want or trying to say. And he's just reluctant. And a part of that goes with, I think, the other biggest issue with him is he has a defiant streak in him that is, I wonder if he's not speaking by choice sometimes. Because the boy just loves to be defiant, because he understands when he's told to do something, different instructions, but he only follows through about 10% of the time. The other times he looks at you like with this mischievous grin, like, yeah, like I'm not going to do that, or do it anyways if it's something he's not supposed to do. I'm trying to think of what we had else for social.
Can you see the document, Michael, or do you
Yeah,
have
I do, but I don't have my bifocals.
your glasses on? That's just fine. So we did have that he
He likes to chew and eat on cardboard, rocks, anything he can get a hold of outside. Like there's berries he eats that even animals don't eat. And I mean, they're not poisonous, but they're not healthy. And I can't stop him. And sometimes he'll chew and eat the paper and cardboard. Sometimes he just wads it up and hands it to me. And it's not like a daily thing, but like with the rocks, he loves putting rocks in his mouth and just sucking on them like they're a jawbreaker. So I'm not sure what to do about how to get him to not put things in his mouth that he's not supposed to. I mean, we tried numerous ways of communicating the no. You don't want to just keep using no over and over, try to use like, don't do that, or that's not healthy. That's not, no matter which way you try it with him, it's just doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't sink in, but it just doesn't move him to not do it.
And Michael has tried giving him other choices, other food options. He's actually a very picky eater. And for a while, the cardboard eating was pretty pervasive. He did eat about half of the giant cardboard box. And he really likes to eat the sucker sticks and paper, but he does not like to eat other foods besides sausage, right, Michael?
Oh God, sausage is his favorite. Um, but yeah, and he will eat. He's good at eating fruits. Like he loves his raspberries, blackberry, regular fruit that he's supposed to have, not the wild berries. But he will eat fruits. He will eat some vegetables like corn and some sliced carrots. He won't take food from you. He has to take it himself too, which is the other thing with feeding him. He won't let you use a spoon, fork, or just hand him something without putting it down and letting him get it himself. So there's always the challenge there of whether or not he's going to try something. But he does have the strengths, like me and Erica have talked about, Lauren and Holly too, when they're here. His defiance is also a combination of a determination. And I think that's one of his strengths is he'll see something through. Like when he was younger, he spent a good half hour one day just at a door figuring out how to open it until he got it down. And that was probably when he was like 15 months old. And I've never seen any 15-month-old kid spend a half hour at trying to figure anything out. But he was bound to determine that he was going to stay there at that door until he figured it out. And he likes to tinker, like stacking things, physical activities, and all of that goes with his time. I mean, he's moved 15-pound bricks that, he has to put down every 2-3 feet because it's that much of a struggle for him, but he's not going to let it deter him if he wants to move it. So the defiant determination is kind of like I said, a double-edged sword with him, where it's bad at some things and a good quality on others. Like recently he learned how to work a squirt gun, and he literally spent 15 minutes until he figured it out. And now his siblings can't squirt him without him squirting them back. And socially with other kids, he doesn't acknowledge other kids, even smaller kids his size around him. He tolerates them being around, but he doesn't interact with them. It's like he doesn't acknowledge them there, but he also he's not negative towards them either. So I'm definitely kind of concerned about that with kids. I mean, at least that could possibly grow into a positive if he at least accepts them around him. But I'm not sure what else I was supposed to cover here, Erica.
No, that's fine. I think you've done awesome, Michael. The main things that we just wanted to bring to the group, where right there you can see the concerns, is that slow progress on speech. We've really tried implementing, kind of all the strategies in our toolbox. Doing sign, he's very resistant to that, does not want to do that. The pictures, giving choices, we worked a lot on getting him to look at a face and respond that way. He was doing good for a while, then he got sick and he's had a lot of regression in that. And it's been very difficult to pull him back from that. When dad holds back and tries to verbally prompt him to request, it ends up in meltdowns. Dad's tried reading books with him and he ends up getting upset, screaming, just ripping the pages or eating those. Although he did say, I did bring a very thick cardboard book that he did better with recently. The underlying defiance is something that originally, when this has been a frustration for Michael, is explaining to people that, oh, he's defiant. And at first we're explaining, oh, well, he's so little and I don't think it's defiance, it's sound understanding. But he actually will do things. Now you watch his little face, he'll look at you and he gets this look and he'll do it. And we've worked a lot on those behavioral strategies of not reinforcing that, and dad's good at not trying to turn it into a game or play with it. He just wants to do the things he knows he's not supposed to, and so he will do it and he thinks it's funny. And so that's one thing that's been really frustrating to Dad. But like you said, he also has that determination. So he's, that's something we've been trying to problem solve on how to help with that. And then that eating cardboard has been one that was it's pretty difficult, because he'll run over and he'll reach and he'll put it in his mouth and chew it and run off. And we've addressed kind of, maybe it's a fiber issue, maybe it's a pica, maybe it's other things, but it's really just, it's just been an interesting one on him fixating those. At first it started with the sucker sticks, which we understood because of the flavor on there, but then it escalated to where he ate nearly, like it was a giant cardboard box like a dog. He ate it, and we can't imagine that's healthy for digestion. Again, we're doing OT and special instruction, all these things. So just those 3 things. And I don't know if we want to discuss it in different groups on those, or each group discuss it, but just how to help improve his language, how to help with that defiance, and then some problem solving on that cardboard eating, or those berries that he is super hyper fixated on, because they are not edible berries, but he wants to eat those because they are off limits. So yeah.
And I wonder if that defines too, just knowing that he's not supposed to with the cardboard. I don't know. And someone asked about if he had been diagnosed with the opposition defiant disorder. He has not been diagnosed with that. But being at his age, I don't know if he's age appropriate for how much diagnosing you can really do with a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, he hasn't been. The only thing he's been evaluated for at this point is autism.
So haven't been able to get down to any like specifics. Yeah, the pica, the dog talked to his doctor about pica, and she said with the iron test, it usually shows with the pica there. And she said there was no sign of anything that would alert her to pica being a part of it.
Yeah, and we discussed other texture. Michael, did you end up trying the dry, like the wheat tortillas, and seeing if he would like those? And
well, he has been, but like I said, it's not every day he's doing the cardboard now. So I don't know
anymore.
In between, just if he's bored and he goes to it as like just a habit because he's done it before. But he has been eating a little more of like some like wheat thin type things.
Oh, good. Okay.
And some shortbread cookies. I've been trying to get him on the sugar-free shortbread cookies to see if that would help with it.
Yeah, we've been working on trying to find replacement textures, and interestingly enough, he doesn't really care for like bread or pancakes, but he was wanting to eat cardboard. So but he could subsist on sausage if he was allowed to. He will just down like breakfast sausage.
Yeah, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if he had his choice, I'm sure.
Yes.
That with a bowl of raspberries every now and then.
All right, so that's kind of where we're at with him.
Okay.
So
Awesome. Well, we're gonna go ahead and split into groups. Well, I guess
I wanted to answer a question. Someone asked about Chewy. He does have those, but he gets bored with them because of lack of taste after so long.
we've tried several different types as well.
Yeah, that he could like chew on in place of, and he'll use it temporarily, but then it's just like I said, he realizes there's no taste, or it's just not the texture he's looking for. I don't know, but he gets bored with those quite easily.
And then it tends to become a weaponized throwing projectile. Most things become
Everything
that.
is.
as you do,
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and split into groups, and I do have it so each group is talking about a different question. That way you guys can get resources for all of them. So the first group is Kirsten's group, and you guys will know who all is in it. You're just the first name on my list, Kirsten. But you guys are gonna be talking about language and just suggestions for helping with his language and speech. And then Pat, your group will be talking about defiance and how to help with that. And then Heather and Shelby, I have you guys together, and you're going to be talking about the cardboard, eating cardboard. And then Our last group is Kate and Rebecca, and you're also going to be talking about eating cardboard. So, and then if you guys run out of time, feel free to discuss the other ones as well. But those are just your main ones. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. And then, oh, Erica and Michael, I will every 5 minutes, I'll bounce you around to a new group in case they have questions or want to follow up with anything. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and open those rooms. And if you don't, you should see it. If you don't see an invitation, let me know and go and discuss. Go ahead and share. So if what the person who took notes or someone from the group wants to share one thing that you guys talked about, I'll go ahead and just go like group by group. So Kirsten, your group. I don't know who took notes, but whoever wants to share something.
Okay, Barb took notes, but I'm going to be the one that's going to share. We had a whole bunch, we talked about language. We had a whole bunch of ideas, good ideas that came out. One that I'm just going to pick up that I liked was just the idea of really following the child's lead and picking an activity that he really likes. So when he demonstrates that he is really wanting to stick with something, that you just use that and follow his lead and be down on his level and really talk about the positives, just provide a really rich environment, label things for him, narrate, but don't make any demands on him, so that you're just providing those labels and those things that that child is interested in, and not trying to get him to say any specific words. And then just really modeling a lot of really positive alternatives so that the child's not hearing the word stop and no all the time, but things are being phrased positively so that he's not picking up on those words.
Awesome. Thank you. And now Pat, your group. Oh, wait, you're muted, Pat.
I took the notes, so I can go over. Do you want me to do that, Pat? Yes, okay, thumbs up. Okay. So we really liked talking about just the basics of the ABCs of behavior. We really loved that Dad looked at his defiance as a strength. And then, wondering, is the defiance truly defiance, or is it because he's frustrated? Is he really understanding what is being asked of him? Or again, is it maybe he doesn't understand? There was a thought to create more of a consistent schedule so that he knows what's coming, and define some things that are appropriate for those sensory needs instead of chewing on cardboard and maybe putting the cardboard away. Some of those strategies we're using like the first then principle, and using like a timer for behaviors. So he knows that, again, what the expectation is and it's coming up. Precision commands were also mentioned as another idea. And then the thought of, behavior gets worse before it gets better. So just using these strategies more than one time for a week, right? Maybe using them, 10 plus times a day for a month to really see, did it work or did it not?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brenna, for sharing and your group. And we're out of time. So Heather and Kate, I'm sorry you don't get to talk. But we will put all the notes together. So I think, do we send them to Kate? Is that right? Okay, she nodded. So those who took notes, send it to Kate, and she already put her email in the chat. As you can tell, she's on top of it. So yeah, just send that. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We really are just so happy to have these and happy to have you guys here. And we hope you'll come back next month. Again, Ashley's going to do it. So it's June 7th. I think I already forgot what I had said earlier. But thanks again. And then Michael and Erica, we will send you those notes. So I lost you on my screen, but
Perfect. Thank you.
yeah. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.